All right, in this online series of client-server system. Today I will talk about the client-server model. Remember that we already talked about the fact that a client-server model consists of three components. The first component is a client, which is a program that requires certain services, a server that provides the services, a network that connects the client with the server, and this network actually consists of a communication link. There has to be a communication link between the client and the server. There has to be an address where to reach the server or the client, and also there has to be a port number where the client can actually get into the computer or the memory or the resources of the server. So having said that, let's try to visualize and to see this model, how it works. In general, let me quickly show here what I have, and then I will go over it one more time. I have a place where some client sits, and there is a computer or a host where you have services, and those are services. Actually, it's the same right here. Those are the services that are provided by the server on this host, on this computer. So that's basically, so you have a client, you have a server with services, and you have a port that the client tries to connect and to access the server, which provides the services through this port. And with this port, now of course this port has an address, and I will explain that more thoroughly. From this port you go through certain values here. These are memory locations. These are actually 2 to the power 16 memory locations, and they are called the sockets or the virtual ports, which allow the client to communicate through the port, through the socket, and through the service. So let's try to build this together so we can understand it thoroughly. All right, here we go. So let me create actually a new slide here. Now with the slide, I will create, this is here, let me call this, actually to make it smaller, this is client. Okay, so this is my client. Let me make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. So that's my client. Actually, I can create multiple clients. So I'll have, let's say, 2 clients. I have one more. So I have 3 clients. All right. So these are clients. Let me call this client 1. This could be client 2. And this is client 3. Now, on this side, I will create, I will create a server here. Okay, this is my, actually, let me do it this way. I have, this server provides services. This, let me call this server service 1. And okay, so this is service, make it, this is service 2, service 3. So those are services which are provided by this, sorry, okay, so this is my second service. This is my third service, and this is my host, my service host, server, service, services host, or I'll call it server. So that's my server, which has several hosts. Let me increase this a little bit so that it becomes visible. So now I have a client 1, several clients. I have a server here, and this server actually is a host, has many services, and the idea is for each one of these clients to be able to access each one of these services. Now remember, this is right here, it's a computer. Let me give it a different color so we can distinguish it from the other one. So this is my server, the yellow one. Now in order to be able to access this server, definitely there has to be a port. By the way, this is exactly like any city or state. In order to get to a state, you have to come to a port, like an airport or a seaport. Here we have a computer port. So this is my computer port. Let me do it this way. That's my computer port. And let me give it a color. Let's say this type of color. That's my computer port, and I will call it a port. All right. Now this computer port, so this port actually, now remember that the computer has many ports. For example, it has the USB port, it has a parallel port, it has Ethernet port, it has Wi-Fi port, it has the HD port, high definition port, it could have serial port, parallel port, and so on. So this is, but those ports are limited in number because those are hardware ports. Those are hardly fixed. They are very engraved in the computer, if you will. They are part of a computer system, part of the hardware. So now, to make the story, let me see, client 1 wants to communicate with service 1. This is client 1. I come to the port. Now I need to go all the way to service 1. So I will check here another line, and then I make one more, so I come to service 1. That's how it should be in principle. That's how we think of it. Let me just make this a little bit thicker so we can see it. All right. Well, come on. Okay. Okay, let me see how I'll do that. Trying to do something fancy here. All right. Okay. Make this and one more time so we can see those connections. Okay, here we go. So this is the idea. I need to connect. Now let me make this right here, make it a little bit better, put it up so I can see it. Okay, so now client 1 goes through the port of the computer. From the port of the computer goes to service 1. Now assume that I need also to connect. Let me give this another color here, make it red. Now client 2 wants to communicate with service 3. How do I do that? So this is how it goes. Okay, and from here I go to service 3. Note that there seems to be a conflict. Let's say if client 1 and the client 2 want to communicate with service 1 and service 3 at the same time, and you have one and only one port. So who gets the port? If client 1 gets the port, then the port will be busy for client 1, and client 2 will not be able to go to service 3. So what's the solution? Well, the most simplest solution is, let's duplicate this port. So I have 2 ports. I can have 2 ports. It's not big deal. It's not costly. I can do that. And I bring this guy here and this guy here. Okay. And let me change the color of this so it will be visible. For some reason, okay, let me bring to the front. Okay, and let me make it red again. So now I have this one like this. Okay, so I have 2 ports. Now what if I want to do client 3? Create one more port. Oh, that's not big deal. I can do that. Computer, I can afford 3 ports. What if I have 1,000 clients? They want to communicate with 3 services or 20 or 30 services on the host. It becomes impossible to add ports. So this solution obviously is invalid. So it's a bad solution. So this is a bad, inefficient solution. What should I do? What do we have to do? Let's see. We can think together and find a solution. Well, solution is like this. Let me take this guy right here, duplicate it, do it here. Let me take one of these ports. All right, so I have a port here. Let me take this out. Let me take this out and introduce the new concept of a socket. Let's see how we do that. Now I'll do something like this. I will call this a socket. Okay. One more. One more. One more. Actually, I can do so many of these. And one more. I'll make this like this. Okay. And I will make a line like this, and I will make it dotted. Okay, that's not working. Anyway, I don't need that. Okay, now those ones, those which I have those blue boxes, I will call them sockets, or I will call them virtual ports. All of these, this port actually represent or is represented by all of these. How many of these there are? Those are actually memory locations. So let me write here a socket is a memory location. Okay, so the socket is a memory location, and this memory location has 16 bits address. So if these are memory locations and each one is addressed by 16 bits. So how many of these are? How many of these there are? There are 10 or 2 to the power 16. How do I write to the power here? I'll do the font. Okay, and it's superscript, and I will do 16. So 2 to the power 16, and change the font now. 2 to the power 16 memory locations, or 65,535. Let me start call them sockets or virtual ports. Virtual ports means this port, which you could see right here, this port now is connected directly to one of these 2 to the 16 or 65,535 locations, and each one of them is called a socket. Actually, I can do now something like this. From this port, I can go to this location, okay, and from this port I can go to this location, or from the same port I can go to this one, or to any one of these. So in principle, so this port becomes a means of connecting this client or any of these clients to any of these services through a socket. So this is called a socket. That's my socket, and this socket is identical to this port in the sense that this port has a physical address. Now when I say physical address, let me now make sure that we know what we are talking about here. This port has, the physical address is IP address. Let's say 78.32.77.3. That looks like an IP address, doesn't it? So this is an IP address, and this IP address, I just gave it a number, and this IP address can uniquely identify this port and find it. This could be the wireless card address that belongs to this computer or to this host. Now, in order for these clients now to connect to these services, what we will do now for this one, instead of accessing that port, it will access this port, and let me take this one here now. It will come to this port, and from here it will go directly to the socket, and let's call the socket, give it number 1. Let's give it number 1. Okay, and this one I will give it number 2000. Okay, and I will show why I need it to be, let's say, 2000. Okay, so this is very tiny, you barely can see it, but this is 2000. Okay, and this one is, let's say, 65,534. Let me increase the width here a little bit so we can all see. All right, so that we can. Okay, now having said that, So this is my client, and now this one, the same thing can come to this port, and through this port it will take you to socket number 2000, and this one, client 3, can come here, and from client 3 you can go to socket 65,534, and from these sockets you can access any of these services, by the way. So let me move these services a little bit behind so we can easily access them. Let's say client 1 now wants to access service 1. Okay, so I come here to service 1, and let's say client 2 wants to access service 3. Okay, and let's say this guy wants to access service 2. So here we are. Now this port actually provides one means of communication, like you go through this port, but then you are hooked to the socket. So this socket now becomes the place where the communication goes through. So instead of having 65,000 ports or more, or 64K ports, I will have one port and 64,000 memory locations, and each one of these locations I could use as a port to go to the to access my server or my service. Now one more thing I want to mention before I conclude this lecture. In the number of sockets, which is 65,534, the first 1,024 sockets from 0 to 1,023, those are reserved ports. Actually, we can call the socket as a port. It's really a virtual port, but we still can call it port. So those are reserved. Don't use them. They are used by system software, Windows, Unix, TCP/IP, and the rest of the ports, 1024 to 65,534, those are accessible by users, by clients, or by other servers. We could use them. So if you want to write a program and to write a socket program, and you want to define a port number, make sure you define a port number between 1024 and 65,535, because the rest of them from 0 to 1023, those are reserved. Let me show you a place where what these ports are reserved for. Actually, you go to list of TCP and UDP port numbers. This is from the net. Look at this, port number 0, this is reserved, all of these assigned, reserved, assigned. All right, if you go, let's say, assigned to daytime, this guy number 13 to daytime protocol. Let's say port number 17 is for the code of the day. This one message send protocol. And if you go all the way down, let me scroll down quickly, you will find this goes all the way to 1023. So from 0 to 1023, all of these ports are reserved. Do not use them. If you use them, you use them on your own risk. You may confuse your system and your program, and it may not work. And if it works, it only works temporarily, because the ports are supposed to be used by other protocols which are already, let's say, by the telnet, by NetNews, by FTP, FTPS, by VPN. All of these are protocols that are assigned to one of these ports. use anything above this, above 1023. Otherwise, you will use them on your own. Now, having said that, let me go back to my system. I will close right here. I'll close right here, and this I will call it introduction, introducing the concept of sockets. This is what it is. That's what we have just done. Next, we will start programming the sockets, and I will stop right here, and I will see you for the next lecture.